this computer. Ta-da! All right. Okay, welcome to Making the Clovers, our demo class. So some of you have received your kits. The clovers are these sweet little things that are made of velvet. And so for the class, you're going to learn how to assemble the clover and then also how to make the beaded dome and the clover flower. And we do have a demo, we do have a video up on YouTube already that is on making the little ornament size, although it does not have to be an ornament. So that's what we're gonna accomplish today. This is the green colorway, and then this is the cozy colorway. And then there's also an option of getting just an ornament size. So these guys take half the amount of fabric as the bigger guys. So that's what we're going to learn today. So I'm going to move this a little bit out of the way. Oopsie. And I want to show you the tools that we're going to need for today. So I use a little bit of spray starch sometimes when I'm working with a 13mm and 7mm ribbon for this project, but it's not, I would say it's optional at this point. I use a water-filled spray bottle. We're going to need a little tiny bit of tacky glue. And this is Eileen's original formula tacky glue. We don't need much, but I always keep it upside down in a mug so it's ready to go. You need a rag, damp if possible, needle nose pliers, and that's for pulling a needle through. Sometimes it's tricky to do that with ribbon. And we have regular sewing thread, and we're going to have beading thread as well. And in this case, I'm going to be using white. I'll use thread magic or a thread conditioner to condition the thread so it is more cooperative for me. I'm going to use a little scissors so it's easier to use that. A pencil, assortment of needles, primarily chenille and milliners. And I have two kinds of scissors. I have a fabric cutting scissors and then a cardboard or paper cutting scissors, and a stuffing stick and wool roving. And I think that's all we're going to need for today. You may have instructions as well. So let's get started. I'm going to reset all my tools so that they're handy for me. And I also want you to know that after the class is over, it takes a while for the Zoom to turn the recording into something that can be downloaded. And then once it's downloaded, then it'll be uploaded to our YouTube channel. And we'll send you the link so that you can check it out. You can watch it as many times as you want, or like Becky says, she wears out the what button do you wear out, Becky? I don't remember. All right, so that's that for there, and we're going to get started. First thing you're going to need to do is to take your pattern and make a firm pattern out of it. So in your kits, you'll have something that looks like this and like this, if you've bought the kit. So, and then we also include something called railroad board, which is what this is. This white cardboard is railroad board. It's sturdy but bendable. So I will cut out the pattern and tape it to the railroad board and then cut it out so that I have a number of them. So sometimes I use chipboard for the cardboard, and sometimes I use the railroad board. I've used these multiple times. It's going to be easier or better if you have at least 3 of them, or 4 in the case of the 4 um, 4-petal clover. So those are available on this sheet, and you just have to cut them apart and make those firm patterns, because that's the technique that helps us to make a really nice shape. So I would just use my cardboard cutting scissors to just cut them out all the way around. Okay, now the next thing that you're gonna need to do is a little bit of pressing. So one time, or at our last class, somebody asked about pressing on velvet, and was there a secret to it, or? And one of the gals suggested a press cloth that was used for embroidery. So I did a little research because I just wanted to check it out, and I decided to try a terry towel, and that does work too. I always interface the velvet before starting to work with it, and that's because, you know, velvet is really it's really a little bit of a tricky fabric. So this is the fusible knit interfacing, and we include this in the kits. So the way I like to fuse it is to mist the piece of interfacing and the velvet just lightly, and then I'm going to actually put a little press cloth over that. And then I'm going to just grab my iron and press. So I'm using some silk organza so I can see what I'm doing. And it takes a while for the glue or the adhesive to actually melt. And sometimes, you know, it lifts up off of the fabric as well. But there it is. So it still has a little bit of a crush going on, but it works. So that's one option. The other thing I'll do is I have a really nice wool press board, so I will use that and not worry about the fabric getting crushed. My iron was on high, so it's on the high setting, and there's steam on it. So you have to be careful though, because that's why I use a press cloth, because the interfacing will melt otherwise. So just be careful, and that's the other reason why I did it misting. All right, so next step is to trace all of the shapes onto the velvet, and I'm doing them all in the same direction, rather than, you know, fitting one in here or in here. So I'm just going to use a little pencil and trace around, which you can see I've already done. And then there's about a 3/8 inch seam allowance in between everywhere. So it's not necessary to have any more than that. And then I would start to cut these out. So for instance, I'll just go like this. I usually just use the whackety whack method. It's not necessary to have a fabric pattern as well as a cardboard pattern. Just trim it. And I'll do that for all 6 pieces of the for the clover. And this is the largest one that we're making, so takes the most fabric. So does the 4-petal, takes the most. All right, so our next step is to start shaping the clover. So I do this in 2 different methods. Sometimes I will sew it. So that's a little gather stitch, and then I pull the gathers tight, and the fabric will cup around the cardboard. Or I will press it up onto the cardboard. Both methods work. And in the instructions, I've done the sewing method. So I want to show you the pressing method this time. So that means I need my press cloth again, or my pressing surface. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to start right here. And I want to get the edges damp. So then I'm going to place a piece of cardboard and fold that up and start pressing. So it's kind of similar to preparing a fabric piece for a finished edge applique. So then I'll just keep going all the way around. And I'm going to leave the cardboard in half of the pieces and take it out of the others. So we will utilize the cardboard to help us get a really nice shape. So we just go all the way around. So then you just kind of have to work it a little bit until you exactly have it how you want it to look. Okay, so I'm not going to mess with it anymore right now, but I would take a little bit more time to mess with it. So you're going to do that for all 6 of the petals. Huh? I will, definitely. Okay, so I have 1 piece without cardboard in it and 1 piece with cardboard in it. And now we're going to start sewing them together, and I'm not going to remove the cardboard until I get halfway done. So how do we start it? I have double thread conditioned with a knot at the end, and I'm going to slip into the point, slip my needle into the point, and then take another little stitch right at the point, just so that the knot doesn't pull through. I'm not stitching into the cardboard, though. I'm stitching above the cardboard. Now I'm going to grab the point of my second petal and join those together. And then from this point, I'm going to whip stitch those edges. So I have a little bit of a pin, or I have a little pin here, so I can just put the pin there just to help me stay on top of it or keep it aligned properly. And now we just whip stitch the edges together. So this is the beginning stage. If you wanted, you could do a decorative stitch here with floss and you wouldn't need to bead it. You could insert a trim here if you'd rather. I think that would be a little tricky though. And so it takes a short bit of time to do this. So once I get up to this point right here, I will then pull this back and just grab out the cardboard. And by keeping the cardboard in there for a little bit of a time, it helps me to create a really beautiful shape. And that's my goal. So you can see it's a really nice heart shape. So it's a wonderful technique to do for all kinds of different shapes. So let's say that we have this sewn. Well, we have to be able to stuff it, right? So I'm going to sew all the way around from here to here and end right there. On your pattern, you'll see that there's a little mark. So that is the mark to where we sew, so we can leave this open here. But it's also the mark where we'll start the Pico beading edge. Okay, so this piece is already completely stitched together. And my stitches aren't perfect. And I'm using a matching thread for this. I've also tried this with a different fabric. This is our matelassé, and it works just as well. You know, because hand sewing the velvet can be a little bit forgiving because your stitches can get lost in the pile. So now we're going to stuff it. So this is my wool roving. It's from Dimensions. The reason I like working with wool roving is because it has a little bit of a tooth. So, and it compacts really nicely. So it helps you to have a better shape, and it's so much, I find it so much more easy to use than polyfill for stuffing. And the other thing I noticed is that I'm looking for it. Here it is. I found it. I noticed that the stuffing tool grabs the wool roving a little bit better. So let's just pull a little bit of this out. I got this from Michael's. Now, I haven't cut my thread, so I still have this opening here and my thread is attached. So just take a little bit at a time and start stuffing. It's just stuff, 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 stuff. And then you shove the stuffing into a corner and keep going. And it'll take, it'll take a pretty good amount of stuffing. And this is kind of an important aspect of the clover petal. So you just want to take your time and do it well. So I'm not gonna keep stuffing it, but I like them really, really, really full, like super full. So this one is stuffed. This one is not stuffed. So you can sort of see the difference. This one is pretty firm. Once I am completely through stuffing, then I'll take my needle and thread and sew that opening closed. How are we doing so far? Good. Okay, so now it is time to do the little Pico beading technique. So I'm going to grab my beads. Now every one of these little petals is going to be Pico beaded. So I have these two are already done. And I decided I wanted to mix it up a little bit. So we changed the bead colors. So the original is in silver and crystal beads. we're hearing somebody's conversation or something, and if you could mute yourself, that would be awesome. All right, now, have you guys done the Pico beading technique at all before? Well, let me get that little pattern. So I want to start beading right here. Okay. Oh, can you overstuff? I think you probably could if it starts kind of like distorting the shape a little bit, but I still could have continued to stuff this a little bit more. So yeah, I think I've distorted other things a little bit, not so much this one. But you see, it makes a perfect heart. So I'm gonna start beading there. And this is a time-consuming process. I have a beading thread, I have a milliner's needle, and I have a knot at the end of the thread. I'm going to start down here because this is where I'll be able to hide a whole lot of issues or messes. And I'm just going to take my needle all the way up to that mark. So the mark again is right there. What trigger? Oh, okay. All right. Okay, so I've stitched up to that area and now I'm taking another stitch just so that locks in. Oh. So is it slow for you guys? Sometimes feather. Okay. Okay. All right. We're good. Okay. So to do the Pico beading technique, you need 2 different sizes of beads. It's better with 2 different sizes of beads. So I have a size 11 seed bead and I have a size 15 seed bead. So the gold is the size 15. The other thing that is effective is if the beads are kind of different. So this one is more of a Ceylon bead, but it happens to be Aurora Borealis or an AB. And this one is just a metallic. Serious. Stop. So while we're doing the class, it's better for you to be muted because we can hear it and it can be distracting. So ask questions by typing them in and we're happy to answer them. Okay, so let's get this Pico beading technique started. For the very first set of beads, you're going to grab a size 11 and a size 15 and a size 11 seed bead. Oops, I got two size 15s. So you see what I have on my needle. All right, so then I'm just going to slip those down. And then I'm going to take a bite at the edge that is about the width of one of the seed beads, the size 15, size 11 seed bead, and pull that through. So you have 3 beads. So now we have to kind of force them into place. So I'm going to turn the piece over, and then I'm going to go back, and I'm going to push that last seed bead forward a little bit so that I can go back up through it and pull my needle and then give it a tug. And by giving it a tug, it helps the bead, the little size 15 bead, to sit in between the two at the edge. Now, from this point on, we will take just a size 15 and just a size 11 to continue to bead the edge. And this time, instead of going the distance of a whole seed bead away, I'll go the distance of a half seed bead away. And I'm taking a bite in the seam. So it's not just a little tiny bit that I'm grabbing, because what happens is if you take a little bit bigger of a bite, it helps the seed bead to stay where it needs to stay. Now, pushing it forward, I'm pushing that last bead forward so that I can find where I can slip the needle back up through it, pull through, and then pull taut, really snug. So let's do it again. Take one of the size 15s, one of the size 11s, take a bite, pull through, push the bead forward with your finger, grab the last seed bead so you can stitch through it and pull through. Pull taut, flip it over to the other side. Do it again. Grab, stitch, flip it over, I flipped it over, stitch through, pull taut. So that is the whole process for the entire petal. When you get to the center up here, you can add some fancier beads to the area, or you can add a collection of sequins, or you can put anything you want, or you can leave it without anything. So that's the process of the Pico beading. So this is something you'll want to watch probably over and over again. It's really enjoyable to do the Pico beading because it helps you to slow your brain down, and that's a good thing. Helps you to be calm. You can put on music or your favorite something or other. Now, the next step is to start sewing the petals together. So I have two of them. I have my doubled conditioned thread with a knot, and I'm going to start by just stitching into the point. Again, into the point. I took a double stitch so that the knot doesn't pull through, and now I'm going to stitch into the point of the second petal so that those can be pulled together. And from this point on, I'm going to take little stab stitches, just one little stitch at a time, so that I can continue to stitch these edges together. So it's kind of a slow process. Take a look on both sides. And take your time to doing this. Sometimes when I do this, my stitching isn't as nice as I wish that it is or was. So we're going to continue to do that for the entire space right there. And then when that's done, you'll add in the next one. Okay, so I have this piece all ready to go. So all of my three petals have been sewn together. And so this is the right side, and this is the wrong side. Mostly because I have the special little bead right at the center of the petal dip. And sometimes I notice that the beads look more pronounced on one side than they do on the other. So I choose which is the right side and which is the wrong side. So I have a little bit of 3mm ribbon here. And so when I feel I haven't stitched it really well, I'll cover my stitch line with a little bit of ribbon a couple of times in the space, and it just cleans it up a little bit. You can use matching thread, you can use an embroidery floss, any of those things will work. So that's the main construction of the clover. You can see mine isn't exactly perfect, so it's bugging me a little bit. All right, now before we go any further, we're gonna make the stem.
Pico bead stitch around the clover, leaving a non-bead edge at point to connect.
Yes, 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 yes. The question was, do I Pico bead the clover and then leave this space unbeaded? And the answer is yes. There are no beads here and here. So that's where we have a free space to sew the petals together. I think a couple of my students have continued to bead a little bit, and I mean, it's not necessary, but if you want to, it's okay. If you want to, it's okay. So now we're going to make the stem. So the stem is made with a pipe cleaner. Let me grab all my parts. Okay, ready. So I use a pipe cleaner because of the cloth aspect of it. It makes it possible for me to glue to it. And I can make a thicker stem than if I was just using wire. And I don't really want to make something this tiny and stuff it. So what we do is we take the pipe cleaner and we fold it. And in the instructions, it says how long to make it. This is kind of a long stem. So if you want it shorter, it's okay. So I have it folded and then I crunch it all together. And then I take needle and thread. So I have again my milliner's needle, doubled thread, and I'm just going to start sewing this together. So first I have to get the thread to adhere. Oops. Let's just get it to go. And then I wrap it tight. All the way down until it looks like this. So that's just to put the layers together, and it helps to give it a little shape. Now we're going to clean this up. So in your kit, you'll have a little piece of bias silk. And I'm going to start by covering the end here. So I've already done this on this one. Think of the bias strip as lining. So I've got my my tacky glue, and now what I'm going to do is wrap the rest of the stem with the bias, florist tape style. So I'm just going to put a little bit of glue all the way down. And then I'm going to just start wrapping the bias. If you've ever used florist tape, this is the same process. All the way down, all the way down, all the way down. Then I can cut that off and give it a little bit more glue there at the end. So now what we have is a stem that has been lined. Sometimes I do this too. So it cooperated really nicely for me. The next thing I'll do is put on the first layer of the 13 millimeter ribbon. Now this is when I will use spray starch. So I'll just, if I spray starch this piece of ribbon and the 7 millimeter ribbon for the stem only, it gives it a little bit more body. But I've also done it without, and that works too. So if you don't have any hands. So we have to get this going. So I'm going to start by putting a little bit of glue on the tip. And then wrapping it around a little tiny bit. And my hands are a little gluey right now, so I like to keep a wet rag handy so I can clean my hands. That's somewhere on the table here. Right there. Just keep your hands clean. And this is the same process where you will wrap the ribbon around the lining, the bias strip lining. And that cleans it up a little bit. Cut it off. And then just because it just wasn't enough that way, go ahead and wrap the 7 millimeter ribbon around the stem too. Doesn't need much, and then I cross it and go back the other way. It just makes the stem have a little bit more oomph, body. It looks better. It makes a little crisscross. And we tie it up, we glue it off. Jude is looking at things. Jude wants the wool roving. Now, sometimes I'll bead the stem. And this is just totally, okay. Is it time for the beaded dome? One last thing. Sometimes I'll bead the stem. So for instance, it's on this. So I will attach thread to the stem and then slip on a whole bunch of beads and maybe a little bit of a pattern, and then wrap those beads around and then adhere or sew the beads in place down there. So that's how that's done. Just got to get it started, get it adhered, and then wrap it around. All right, so that is how the stem goes. And we can take the stem and give it a little bit of a bend like so, and it can be glued in place. Now, it can either be glued or sewn in place now. We're going to move on to how to make the beaded dome. So that is the whole process for making the clover. And now let's do the embellishments. So the beaded dome is just the process of adding layer after layer after layer of beads to the space. So I've done this two ways actually. If this is glued on, then you would sew, or glued or sewed on, then you would sew right over this space and just keep building, 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 building until you have a dome shape full of beads. But I've also done it to where I built the dome onto a piece of interfacing. This is the mid-weight non-woven Pellon interfacing. And I could then put that in place. So either way will work. But let's show you how to make a beaded dome. So I'm just using, I'm using doubled thread again, but I could have used beading thread. And these are the beads that I'm going to work with. But this is just a matter of grabbing. I start with just the basic beads, like 4 or 5 of them. And then I lay those down and put another row right next to it and do it again. And this is just to build a foundation. Now, if you're going to be going over a stem, you're going to use more than 4 or 5 beads. Maybe you'll need 6. You just keep building, 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 building. So it's not a very organized process. You just keep doing it. So then let's say we come over to this spot here. Well, okay, I'm going to start adding in some other things. I have a little sequin, and I have some of the smaller beads, and I'm just going to start throwing that into the mix. And I'm going to do it kind of in a spirally kind of a pattern. The sequins will really go a long way because they take up a lot of space. So they're a good one to use. And I really don't think too much about it at all. It will just, you'll just continue to do this. Go, go, go until you have, until you're at the point where you can add some of the chunkier beads. Like for instance, let's go over here. So here is a bugle bead. That's going to take up a lot of room, and a sequin. Here's one of the bigger beads. Just mix it up, mix it up.
Barbara Watkins said she's going to use one of the flowers that would be flowers.
Yes, Barbara, that's a great idea to use the flower therapy flowers. Yeah. Love that idea, Barbara. And you'll also have like some fancy bead in your kit if you've gotten the kit. So like this is one of the Swarovski crystals, which I still have a couple of them, but not for long, right? They are gone. They're off the market. So there's a special fancier bead. Just build it. So it's just a super simple technique that was taught to me by my friend Ann Davies, and it packs a punch. So the last thing I'll do is add a little bit of ribbon texture to the whole composition. So I just need to find a place where I can actually stitch through. I'm really just doing kind of a ribbon stitch. And the whole goal is for it to be really filled in. So on this one, it's taken on a triangular shape, and on this one the same thing. See how it just keeps building. And then for this one, like let's say you wanted to do it on interfacing. Well, what I would do is, oh darn, lost my needle. I would fold this down, and by doing that, it gives it a little, fills in a little space right there. And then I would sew that, and then sew this piece in place. And of course my stem would already be on. And I would continue to build that out a little bit till I just loved the way it looked. So the final thing, before we go down to the clover flower, the final thing is just the finish on the back. So you can just take a little button. I'll be right back. Can take any dumb button, and cut a velvet circle a little bit larger, cut a little batting circle, place the button, and then sew all the way around that until you have a little piece. And that little piece is glued to the back side. And it cleans everything up. It's just a cleaner upper. So you can see on this one that I didn't like how I had done my stitching, so I covered it with a little bit of ribbon. And you can see from this side, you don't see it at all. So that is that whole process. And now we're going to move on to the clover flower. Oh, we're doing good. We're doing good. We're doing good. All right. So the clover flower is the process of it's using the knotted stitch that was originally I used it for ribbon work, and now I use it for ribbon embroidery as well. It's the process of I'm looking for my little flowers here. These are some of the flowers from flower therapy. So this is called knotted and entwined loops, which is different from this one. And I think you can see the difference. These are individual, these are entwined. So it's one of the techniques that I've developed in the process of creating flower therapy. And what you need is 7mm ribbon, which is this one right here. You need 3.5mm ribbon, which is this one right here. And you need 2mm ribbon, which is this one right here. In addition to that, you have more 2mm ribbons that make French knots to fill the space. You don't have to use French knots to fill the space. You can use beads and sequins instead if you'd rather. So let's learn that process. I'm going to put these all down. Okay. I also wanted to mention that on our YouTube channel, we have done the little clover ornament in a video. So the finishing is for this center for this piece is on that. All right, so we're going to start with this little diagram. Now, these measurements or this information is arbitrary, but for this kit, I'm using a 1.5-inch circle template and a piece of interfacing, and I'll just trace it. That line designates where we're going to stitch to. Then in addition to that, I'm going to draw three circles. And we're starting with, it's that one. It's the, oh, it's the 3/4-inch circles right in the center. And then I go down to 5/8. Draw the circle. And then we go down to 1/2. And on in your kit, in your instructions, that's what this circle is about. So I want to be able to entwine. I want to be able to entwine the stitches, and I want to know where they have to be placed. So that's what those other cross marks are for. And if you just mark them on your little piece of interfacing, that's all you need to do. So building a flower on the non-woven interfacing allows the flower to be 100% portable. So you can put it anywhere you want to put it. So we're ready to start stitching. So I've already begun this row. So the process is come up into the interfacing at one of those cross marks. Tie a little knot so that the knot is at the outer edge of the circle right there. So once you get it just about there, pull the knot tight. Then grab a hold of the knot, extend the knot to the outer edge of the circle, and then stitch back in to the interfacing. After, skip one, stitch into the next mark. And pull through. And then we'll keep doing that. Go back up into the previous space or the previous line, pull through. And this is why sometimes you need a needle nose pliers. Sometimes things get tight in there. Tie a knot. Grab a hold of the knot and then direct your ribbon down to the outer circle at the next mark. So here's where I came up. Here's what I skipped. Here's where I stitch. And pull through. So then I'm going to do that again. The skipped one, I'm going to come up on the skipped one. Grab the needle nose, pull through. And I will continue to do that all the way around until the entire ring has been encircled. And at the last one, I will intertwine the last stitch with the very first stitch. Grab it. Here's where I came up. Here's the one I skipped. Here's where I'm going to go back in. And so on. So what's neat about this is that you can use any number of color combinations to achieve this look. A 7mm, a 3.5, a 2mm, and then whatever you want for the center. So here's one ring completely encircled, and I have the 3.5mm ribbon, and I'm sorry, 3.5. And I'm going to continue to do the same thing. So you can stack the layers, or you can come in a little bit. I'm stitching through the interfacing. I'm stitching on the second row in. So if this is my first row or the bottom layer, I'm stitching now at this row or the middle ring, the middle layer.
I think you're also asking if you're stitching through the ribbon while you're making the knot.
Oh, okay, no, I'm not stitching through the ribbon while I make the knot. But let me show you that again. So there's where I came up, there's my skip, there's where I'm going to go back down. Now there I am stitching through the ribbon. There I'm stitching through the ribbon just as if I were finishing off a ribbon stitch a little bit. pull through. Okay, go back to where I skipped that one and come up in the fabric or in the interfacing. So now I'm going to tie the knot. All right, when I have the knot where I want it, I pull it tight. So now I'm going to grab hold of that knot. This is where I came up. This is the one I'm skipping, and I'm going to go, is it the one I'm skipping? And then I'm going to go back down right here. So I'm stitching through the ribbon to complete the stitch. Ribbon stitch style. So we come back up in the fabric in the space that I skipped. Tie the knot. Extend it. When I'm happy with the location, grab it. Oh, okay, 4 minutes. And then continue. All right, so that, I will continue to do that. So here is the second layer stitch, and I'll do the same with the 2mm ribbon. And then after that is done, I'll fill the center with French knots. And sometimes I do little looped ribbon stitches all the way around too. Just to, you know, punch it up a little bit, make the colors pretty. You can add beads to this. Beads and sequins are a kind of an inexpensive way to make a center look fancier. So that is the clover flower, and then once that is completely done, then let's see, I'm looking for the 4 petals. Here they are. Then those are sewn in place onto the flower. And I actually kind of made this color to go with this. So lots of options there. And that is the process for making the clovers. Yay! So we're going to stop the recording, and then we can chat. Okay. We just have to figure out where.